Hey guys, today I will be showing you how to replace a broken screen on an iPhone 6. Now remember, there are 4 different models of iPhone 6. We have the regular iPhone 6, followed by the iPhone 6 Plus. Then after those two, we have the iPhone 6s and the 6s Plus. Now, we are going to be working on the iPhone 6. The first thing that you guys want to make sure of before you start your repair is your workstation. You want to make sure that it's clean, that it's properly organized. You want to stay away from any rugs, any tablecloths, anything that could produce static electricity, as we're trying to avoid any damages caused to your device. Second is your tools. Now the tools that you see here are actually included in your kit, but we are only showing the ones that will be used for this specific repair. Starting here, we have a pentalobe screwdriver. Now this screwdriver is used to remove both of the screws located by the charging port in order to gain access into your device. Followed by a Phillips head screwdriver. This one will be used to remove the screws that are located inside of the device. We have some to remove in order to actually gain access to the cables for the display. Here we have a plastic spudger. This one will be used to safely disconnect the cables flexes that are coming from your display onto your motherboard. Here we have a pair of tweezers. Now the tweezers are mainly used to pick up any small bits and parts that are inside of the phone that are difficult for us to reach in with our hands and actually pick up, like the screws pretty much. That's exactly what we'll be using them for. Here we have a pair of suction cup pliers. Now these pliers are used to separate the screen from the device after we remove both of the screws located by the charging port. They're extremely handy, extremely easy to use, but remember, they're only used to separate the screen, not to remove the entire screen. Next, we have this adhesive film. This film is used to be placed on the display like so. Since we're dealing with broken glass, we're trying to minimize the chances of injury, like cutting ourselves, and also is to help the suction created by the suction cups on your screen. Remember, the glass is broken, so air will seep in through the cracks and will break the bond created by the suction cups. So this is where this comes in. Next, and finally on this side, we have this box. Now this box is where our entire kit came in. We'll be using it to place all of our small parts, the screws, anything that we remove from the device, we'll be placing it inside of the box. We want to make sure that we keep track of everything that we remove, that we don't lose anything that we remove, and especially that we do not mix up any of the screws. Mixing up any screw from the device, this is basically, you're going to be running the risk of damaging your device if you were to install a screw in an incorrect location. So keep that in mind and make sure you use your box to keep track of everything that you remove from your device itself. Okay, now the first step in the process, in this repair process for an iPhone, is shutting off your device. So in order to turn off your device, what we're going to do is we're going to press the power button for 5 seconds until you actually get the option to slide and turn off like you see now. Alright, but if you have a badly damaged screen where you cannot see your display or you cannot actually use the touch, what you're going to be doing is resetting your device. So you're going to press the power button and the home button for around 5 seconds until you see any lighting disappear from your display. So let's go ahead and press both of them. 5 seconds and you'll see the image on my display disappear. This will tell us that our phone is totally turned off, like so. Now make sure that you do not touch the power button after this, as this will basically turn your device back on, and you have to make sure the device is shut off before we start this repair. Second step is installing the adhesive film. So we're going to go ahead and remove the paper backing, place that aside, and we're going to be aligning this film at the beginning of our display. Now you see your home button, and then you'll see where the actual display begins, right above it. So we're going to go ahead and align this as best as possible here, and then we're going to use our spudger guided above the film to ensure that we have a bubble-free install. Okay, moving on. Next step is using our pentalobe screwdriver to remove both of the screws by the charging port. Okay. Remember guys, every single time that we're going to be removing a screw, we're going to be placing it inside of the box, keeping track of them, creating small groups. If you guys have a pen or a marker, make sure that you take notes inside of the box, circle the screws that you're removing, label them. If you have to use numbers, just do whatever it takes to make sure that all the screws that you're removing go exactly where you removed them from. So So as you can see, I have both of these screws right next to each other. This is telling me that I have a group of screws that go basically together in the installation. All right, so we removed both of the pentaloop screws. Next is the time to actually pry the screen off of the device. We'll be using our pliers here. They're extremely easy to use. All we're going to do is align the pliers onto the display like so. You want to make sure that the top suction cup is placed after the beginning of your decal here, and then you're going to firmly press on them to create the suction needed, and firmly press on the handles to separate your display like so. Now remember guys, we just separated the display. It doesn't mean that it's okay to remove the full screen. The screen is still attached onto your device while the cables are coming off of it and attached to the motherboard. So make sure that after this, you just remove your tool and do nothing else until we disconnect the cables. So now that we've actually pried the screen, we're able to open it to a 90-degree angle like so, and we could actually see the area that we will be working on. We have the EMI shield. Okay, we have 5 different screws here. The 3 on the bottom are actually the same size, while the 2 on the top are different sizes from the ones in the bottom. So that's when our box comes into play. We want to make sure that these screws all are reinstalled in the actual location. So let's go ahead and start removing these screws. I will be placing them in front of the camera so you guys could actually see the size differences. It's not something that you could actually just see with the naked eye besides one of the screws, but trust me when I tell you that the screws are actually different sizes. Okay. You see how I'm creating a pattern of the screws? Basically what I do is I just remove them and follow the same pattern that were installed in the device. Okay, so we have the 3 screws in the bottom, the 1 on top. This being the top left is actually longer than the other 3. Just as you can see, like I told you, it's difficult to see in camera. And the top right is like 3 times longer than the smaller screws. This one you could actually see the difference in length. So make sure that all the screws actually go exactly where you removed them from. After you remove the 5 screws, you're able to remove the EMI shield from the device. All you have to do is pick it up. You'll be able to place it aside. So, like so. So I'm going to be placing the EMI shield inside my box, and I'm going to be placing the screws right next to each of the openings where they belong, and I remove them from. Now this one being the middle screw, I'm just going to place it in the middle, and then we have all screws inside my box safely so I don't lose any of them. Next, we're going to be using our plastic spudger. We're going to be disconnecting the cables that are coming from your display. We have a total of 4 cables. The first one up top here is your front facing camera. This controls your ear speaker, your front microphone, your proximity sensor. So with any of these cables, you got to be extremely gentle not to dig into the motherboard and potentially damage one of your sockets. So we're going to use just the tip. We're going to insert it right beneath the cable, and you're just going to gently pry it up like so. Move it out of the way and move on to the next one. This L-shaped one is what controls your home button. So go ahead and do the same procedure. Underneath the cable, gently pry it up. This one here is your LCD cable, what controls your display. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing and gently pry it up. And finally, we have your digitizer, what controls the touch on your screen. Same thing, and we disconnect all of the cables. Now, we have removed the screen from our device safely, and we're going to prepare the new screen before we install it onto our device. Now, our new screen comes packaged in this nice plastic packaging which protects the screen during shipping, and more importantly, it protects the cables. Now the cables are the most delicate part in these screens. You want to make sure that you do not fold these cables, do not pre-fold the cables before you install them. Any fold on these cables could potentially damage them and will render your screen useless. So now to compare both of the screens, as you can see, our new screen does not bring the home button. It's not that it's missing the home button, it's that it doesn't bring the home button. It does, however, bring the rest of the components. You have your thermal shield, you have your ear speaker, your front-facing camera, the proximity sensor. Now, the reason why this does not bring the home button is because the home button is actually what retains your functionality for the fingerprint recognition. So we're going to be transferring this home button from our old screen onto our new screen to make sure that we keep that functionality. Now, be extremely careful while you remove this button, as if you break the button and you have to replace it, in the same manner, you're going to lose that functionality for your fingerprint. Now, it doesn't mean that your click is going to stop working. The click will work perfectly fine, but I'm talking just about the function that allows the phone to read your fingerprint. Okay, so placing our new screen aside, we're going to go ahead and remove the button using our Phillips head screwdriver. We're going to remove both of these screws that you see here, just holding this single shield. We're going to be placing the screws inside the box. Make sure that you keep track of exactly where they belong. Second screw. Okay. Alright, so now we can just go ahead and pick up the shield, place it inside of our box, and we're going to go ahead and disconnect the button. To disconnect the button, using the tip of the spudger, you're going to come from the back, from the rear of the flex. You're going to gently pry it up like we did with the cables coming from the display, like so, and unfold it. And we're going to pinch it basically, and we're going to try to insert the flat side of our spudger underneath the cable, as this is actually adhered in place. So you're just going to start pushing until you break the bond. Okay, so now to remove the button from your screen, it has a rubber gasket. As you can see right here, there's a rubber gasket. What you want to do is you want to use your finger, and you're going to press from the front of your screen. You're going to firmly press the button until you actually break the bond for that rubber gasket is also adhered onto your screen. So you're going to press on it, and you're going to peel it off, and there's your button. Now, if your button by any chance has glass residue from the broken screen, you're going to go ahead and you're just going to brush it off with your finger, clean it off as best as possible, and we're going to go ahead and install this onto our new screen. Seeing as we finished with the broken screen, I'm going to go ahead and place it aside. I'm going to start working on this one. So the button only goes one way. So you're just going to drop the button in there, like so. What you need to worry about is the cable itself. The cable itself has two openings that you're going to align. You have this little circular openings on the cable itself, and there are two pins on the screen. You have one and the second one right there. So you're going to align the cable using the openings and the pins, like so. And then we're going to install, basically connect the cable. So go ahead and fold it towards the socket. You're going to move it side to side until you feel it drop on the socket itself, and then you're going to gently press down on it. After you do this, it's time to reinstall the shield. Now, the shield, the same as the flex, you do have an alignment pin, which is located right here, right next to the screw hole. And you have the screw hole on the plate itself and the alignment pin hole right there on top. So we're going to go ahead and align that by placing it on top of the little pin, like so. And then we're going to install the left side screw. Now, I tend to pinch the screw in between my fingers, align it onto the tip of the screwdriver to make it easier to install these screws. Alright, so it's still aligned on the right side, screwed down on the left side. All we're missing is to install the second screw, and we will be done with the installation of this home button. Okay. Alright, so we have prepared our screen for the installation. What we're going to do now is we're going to align the screen onto our device, and we're going to start installing the cables. Now remember, you cannot bend these cables. You do not want to damage the cables themselves. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to push them out of the way. I'm going to hold them with my finger. As you can see, I'm still not bending them, and I'm going to align the digitizer, which is the touch, as best as possible with its socket. Remember to keep your screen at a 90-degree angle while you're installing the cables. Now the same thing that we did with the home button, we're going to move it side to side until we feel it drop into its socket. And we're going to gently press on it until you feel or hear the clicks. Next is your LCD, your display. After you connect the first cable, the following cables tend to be easier since the first one is already installed and aligned. The other ones will follow along. But we're still going to make sure that it's properly aligned, moving it side to side until you feel it drop on the socket, and then gently press on it. Next, we have our home button cable. Same procedure. This one tends to be a little bit harder as it's not as rigid as the other two, but following the same procedures, you should be fine. Now this one, the click, it's not, you don't feel it as much or you don't hear it as much. The actual connection of this cable seems to feel a bit spongy. Just make sure that it's connected properly by pressing down on it after you make sure that it's aligned with the socket. Next, and finally, we have the front facing camera. Go ahead and do the same thing. Align it as best as possible and gently press on it. Okay, so we have connected all of our cables. Made sure that we kept our screen at a 90-degree angle to avoid damaging the connections while we were making them. I'm gonna go ahead and rotate my device, and I'm gonna go ahead and install the EMI shield right on top of the cables once more. So just place it on top of the cables, making sure that the two holes in the bottom are as aligned as possible. And I'm going to go ahead and install the screws. Remember to follow that pattern that you made with the screws inside of your box. Once more, I will pinch the screw in between my fingers and I will align it onto the tip of the screwdriver and then install it. Now, make sure that you do not over tighten these screws. When you feel your screwdriver that stops turning, that's as far as you're gonna go. Stripping the head of these screws will basically make your life extremely difficult for any future repairs or potentially damage the motherboard itself. So make sure that as soon as your screwdriver stops turning, that's as far as you go. Okay, moving on to the third screw. Before we move on to the two on the top, make sure that you do not install these in the incorrect location once more. Cannot stress that enough. All right, top left. And finally we have the top right, which is the longest screw. Always make sure this one goes back exactly where you removed it from. And again, stop turning when the screwdriver stops. All right, so we have reinstalled the shield, we have connected the cables. Last step is basically to seal the phone. What we're gonna do is, in an angle, we're gonna align the top of your display with the device itself. So what we're gonna do is, in an angle, insert the top of the display until it's nice and flush. You're gonna lower the rest of the screen, hold this in place. You're gonna give it some tension from the bottom of the screen towards the top. You're gonna guide your finger along the sides to make sure the screen sits inside the phone properly. And then we're gonna go ahead and install both of the pentalobe screws located by the charging port. So go ahead and pick up your screws, place them exactly where they belong. Tend to place both of them in at the same time. Then I will place my finger over them so the magnetism of the screw don't pull them out. And then tighten them. Remember, when a screwdriver stops turning, that's as far as you go. Now stripping these screws will make it extremely difficult to gain access onto the device. So make sure you don't over tighten these. All right, so we have sealed the device. It's time to turn it on. Make sure everything is working properly. Now, you guys at home, you guys are gonna test the ear speaker, the front facing camera, the proximity sensor, the home button. You're gonna test your biometrics, and finally the display itself. Now, for you guys to test your ear speaker and your front facing camera, you guys could basically make a phone call. For the ear speaker and proximity sensor at the same time, you will make sure you hear the person on the other side properly and perfectly. When you bring your phone up to your ear and cover the top of your screen, your display should turn off. Now for the microphone itself, you go to a voice recording, record yourself, and at the same time you could test your ear speaker and proximity sensor when you hear your own recording. For the home button, make sure that you click and it turns on your display or functions properly. Make sure you test your fingerprint. And afterwards, let's go ahead and test the touch and the display. So the display looks fine. Now for the touch, we're gonna hold an application down and we're gonna drag it all around the screen, making sure that it follows my finger every step of the way. And then we will be done. Now, if you guys by any chance have white lines, white squares on your display, this means that one of your cables could be not connected properly. So you're gonna open your device, check those connections, and then retest your device. Now, before we go, guys, now we're gonna ship this screen back for recycling. What we're gonna do is we're gonna place it in the plastic protective case that the old one came in. We're gonna place it in the cardboard box. Next is placing it inside of the box that our kit came in. And finally, inside of this paid envelope. After that, you're just gonna drop it in the nearest mailbox, take it to the post office, whichever is your preference, and you'll be done with that. So, if you did this repair and everything is working fine, then you have successfully repaired your iPhone 6. That's it for the video, guys. Thank you.